George from Ireland. So I'm talking about the Russo-Ukrainian conflict here. Um, anyway, so it's 17 weeks today since Russia launched this unprovoked and illegal invasion of Ukraine, a country which Russia recognized as a sovereign state. I suppose, in a sense, still does. They've not actually said it's not a sovereign state officially. Um, anyway, so the fight is raging in Severodonetsk, that city which is in Luhansk region, and the Russians have still not quite controlled the whole of the city. So the Ukrainians are fighting on there. Now you'd think they withdraw. The last bridge has been destroyed. Obviously, the Ukrainians could build pontoon bridges, could get across on boats. They'd have to leave a lot of their heavy equipment behind. They could disable it. They could dump it in the river and so on. Quite a few civilians are stuck there. Why are they fighting so doggedly? It's partly Second World War hugging tactics, and obviously the Russian army is reverted to Second World War tactics of simply pummeling the city, just destroying every single building, and obviously killing a lot of enemy combatants in the process, and only then moving in when they think it's pulverized. But by hugging, you have your troops so close to the other troops, your enemy can't risk using his artillery because he's actually going to kill his own men. Because I mean, artillery was not that accurate, particularly Russian artillery, so they say, and they've run out of their precision-guided missiles and so on. The Russians have been reduced to using these anti-ship missiles on land. So I'm told that when you repurpose them like this, they're very inaccurate. Only accurate to within a couple of kilometers. So they'll often hit the wrong building, hit a residential building. So people who are too elderly, too immobile, too sickly to be able to move, they're trapped and they're being killed in huge numbers. So Severodonetsk, it's on the east bank of the river. On the west bank is Lysychansk, where the Ukrainians also are. But the Ukrainians have been pleading for this artillery for HIMARS, these high mobility rocket systems. They're on trucks that NATO has. There are only about 400 in the world. And the United States has got most of those. They're supposedly getting three from the United Kingdom, four from the United States, three from Germany, maybe more. They've got some French howitzers and so on, but these still haven't come into play. They're still being trained on them in Poland. When they do come into play, how much of a game changer will that be? They're said to be very accurate, unlike the Russian stuff. So they take out quite a lot of Russian artillery. But the trouble is, that's only 10 of them. That's maybe not enough to make a big difference. Surprised the Ukrainians aren't trying to penetrate the Russian lines in very small groups and disrupt their supply lines. Just destroy whatever trucks are bringing up more ammunition, because the Russians are getting it through it at a terrific rate, and they're going to run low. It might reach a stage where their factories just can't supply it at the speed that it's being expended. So the Russians are moving forward very slowly, just like about 500 meters a day. It's pathetic, really, with a 10-to-1 advantage in artillery. So the Ukrainians are trying to hold them there until these HIMARS arrive, not to concede too much ground. Then the HIMARS arrive, and supposedly that'll change the dynamic. We shall see. And I wonder if the Ukrainians wouldn't be wiser to just pull back further. And I thought, yeah, go behind Russian lines and try and wreck their transport system, blow up tunnels, road tunnels, rail tunnels, because those would take months or years to rebuild, as well as bridges, which you can rebuild, don't take up quite so long. Obviously, ideally blow it up when something, a truck or a train is there, so you destroyed that as well, not just blocked the route. Um, but they don't really seem to be fighting that irregular warfare, because I thought if they fight these pitched battles, well, then it's really an artillery duel, and the Russians have got a 10-to-1 advantage. And considering their enormous advantage in artillery, the Russian performance has been dismal. Should have moved forward much faster. The Ukraine has been trained extensively by NATO over the last 8 years, and they're much better at rapid advances in good order. And the Ukrainians have proved this with a counteroffensive around Kherson. They've crossed a vital river, trying to cut off Kherson, which is Russian occupied, from the rest of the Russian forces. So they'll be surrounded. They'll not be able to get ammunition, fuel, or food in or anything like that, and maybe force several thousand to surrender. That'd be quite a big psychological blow to the Russians. Counteroffensive around Kharkiv, but that's not progressing very rapidly. Could they even cross the border into Russia? I mean, there've been cross-border raids, but seriously cross the border to Belgorod. Not that they actually want to seize Russian territory, but that's just an arterial route for Russian supplies coming into the Russian forces in occupied eastern Ukraine. But we shall see. Anyway, it's partly to hang on in there until these new Western weapon systems arrive in significant quantities. But they haven't mobilized manpower men between 18 and 60 are not allowed out of the country unless they got some sort of exception, like they're a diplomat or whatever. So they could call up a lot more of them, give small arms to all of them. I mean, small arms would only make so much of a difference because the Ukrainians, they're losing up to 200 soldiers a day, killed in some cases. Now, Russian casualties are thought to be the same. Russia's lost the Donbass, they should pull back. What if they're invaded about Belarus? How would that play out? Good question. Now, Belarus launched a big military buildup on Ukraine's northern border to force Ukrainians to guard that border. They could no longer afford to be complacent because when push comes to shove, Putin might say to Lukashenko, you have to do this because we're in dire straits. And Lukashenko, because he's totally economically dependent on Russia, would have to do it because Russia's got him by the short and curlies. He's a tyrant. He's only in office because Russia is helping his terrorist state stay there, could attack northern Ukraine, and then Ukraine would be fighting really on its eastern front and its northern front. Its southern front doesn't matter as much at the moment. And could they even really take Kiev, which is quite lightly guarded at the moment? The Belarusian army is not huge. They seem to have given most of their helicopters to Russia about a month ago because Russia's obviously running low on them. So that could really help the Russians if the Belarusians did that. So the thing is, yeah, Ukraine could call up a lot of these civilian men. And remember, every Ukrainian man's done a year in the military, but they need refreshers. They're not up to date with the latest tactics or weapon systems. So they might not be very effective soldiers. You take some time to train them, and they don't really have time. You just need to send the battlefront right now. And so Ukraine cannot sustain this rate of attrition much longer. I mean, neither can the Russians. Bear in mind, Ukraine's got only a third of the population of Russia. But Ukraine admits this is a war. It's everything and everyone for victory. Russia still doesn't. It's trying to have business as usual, trying to have life going on as normal, and that's not really going to be viable if it carries on much longer. Their economy is suffering, but not so much that as to significantly threaten the Putin regime. So that's it. I mean, the Ukraine is to hang on at the Donbass, the counteroffensives around Kharkiv and Kherson, regain some land, capture some Russian soldiers, and also therefore equipment, and force the Russians to divert troops to other areas. There appears to be a bit of partisan activity around Melitopol and Mariupol. How do you see this ending in soon? I mean, I think not for several months at least. It may wind down, and partly because of exhaustion, and they're just running out of soldiers. It'll become probably a less intense conflict. I'm a bit surprised that Russia hasn't used weapons of mass destruction. They might do so, but not on an enormous scale. Some of the gas attacks like they did in Syria to kill several hundred people. If those are mostly civilians, the Russians don't care, as they proved many, many times. There had never been a weapons of mass destruction attack in Syrian history. And then the Russian military got involved, and there have been dozens of them since then. And Russia has these nerve agents. The other side does not have the nerve agents. It was only rebel-controlled villages were attacked. I mean, the proof positive that it was the Russians. You'd have to be particularly imbecilic not to realize that. But why have they not done it? Do they think their conventional war is working out okay? Finally, they found out some sort of viable strategy, though it's painfully slow. Maybe they might have been warned behind the scenes by the West. If you do that, we'll do something else. Also Russia wanting to drag out this conflict. They had wanted a quick victory. That's clearly not going to happen because they move at a snail's pace. They can't do blitzkrieg. They were over ambitious. They tried that coup de main and it failed, thinking they could take Kiev in 3 days. But waiting for Western unity to break up, and there are already signs of that. And the West to get tired of the high oil and gas prices, thinking they'll beseech Russia on their knees to turn on the taps. You see, Gazprom has reduced gas sales to Europe again, but that's obviously hurting the Russian economy. But Putin doesn't really care because they're buying hardly anything. Russia's obviously quite a lot in credit at the moment. They have to do without various transponders, microchips, McDonald's. They can cope without that. Little footage emerging the actual battles in the east. Well, we see buildings being blown up, but it's a bit too dangerous to show your head very much. Obviously, there's snipers around. There are not that many bullets flying around, but a shell impact that could get you. Fragments of masonry flying everywhere, as well as sharp bits of metal, which is why you don't want to be filming very much. So it's very slow going. I suspect it's just going to slow down a little bit, but it could be quite soon. It could be within a week. These HIMARS start to arrive. The question is, does the West want to step up these? What if the US were to give all its HIMARS to Ukraine? That really would mean that Ukraine would win the war. But the thing is, you don't have to give them all right now because it's going to take a few weeks to train them. And the United States can be manufacturing more as they hand them over. Give one a day. If they've got about 300, So within a year, Ukrainians would have 300 and the US would produce another 300, and they're not even that expensive as these things go. They're only about $6 million. That means that the Ukrainians would have longer range artillery and much more accurate artillery, 80-kilometer range, and you could eventually get in the 300-kilometer range rockets, which at the moment the United States says they're not going to do. They get hit deep into Russia, really disrupt their supply lines and make Russia pay a very, very heavy price. And it's very tristful because, of course, they're very good people on both sides, and it's an awful pity. The tempered rise between Israel and Iran, focus might be lost on Ukraine. That'd be good for Putin. Exactly. There are all sorts of ways to divert attention. North Korea is partly trying to do that already, helping Russia out, their ally. Moreover, they think the United States doesn't really have much leverage. It's not going to do much about it because they're so focused on Ukraine. China might start flexing its muscles in the South China Sea, building more of these fake islands, seizing more islands in the Philippines or whatever. Would they make a move on Taiwan? Maybe not. They see the Western response has been fairly strong. What sanction there be? The Chinese can make more efforts to sanction-proof their own economy. So this one of the reasons the West had to stand firm over Ukraine is partly because of a precedent over Taiwan. But wait a second, Taiwan is not Ukraine. Almost every country in the world, almost every Western country, recognizes Taiwan as legally part of China. Why is there so little footage of the fighting in a modern war? You think there'll be plenty of it? I mean, as I say, there is a bit. There's mostly buildings being blown up. Yeah. Um, and often maybe it's just not that dramatic. I mean, one building blown up, you've seen it many, many times before. It's quite slow going. You see these rockets being fired from the backs of trucks, but we often don't know when that is. That could have been a month ago. We don't know exactly where in Ukraine that's being fired. It might even be a training exercise years ago. Not terribly exciting. Yeah, it's going to go on for several months. It to some extent depends on this, willpower. It's breaking the enemy's will to fight, but also NATO and EU countries will to support Ukraine with weapons, with finance, diplomatically, and so on. To see that some countries don't go rogue, like Hungary, saying, "Well, we're gonna stop assisting NATO on this one." Makes it with the World War footage is staged. Well, I think you could tell it was World War II footage because the weapon systems have been updated. They wouldn't have been in color. And I know you can colorize black and white film footage, but it's not remotely convincing. Hello, Abbott Gibbon. Well, I go near Windsor all the time. We should meet up sometime. Right, thank you so much for watching. Please donate to me on PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com, and book me for whatever online lessons guided towards a Londinium. I'm signing off now. Toodaloo, everyone.